think about the billions of dollars in generational wealth that Black people were shut out of that still have an impact today because of colonialism. So to me, the most revolutionary thing you can do as a young Black person is to own stuff.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Overture with the Arts Triple A Conference. Thank you for joining us. Woo! Yes, we're doing it big today. We've got a lot happening. My name is Catherine Verdon Diamond. I'm from Breakfast Television Montreal, and tonight I will be your host. Of course, we're celebrating Black History Month, and no better way than to celebrate it with these following people. We're going to start with our first guest. Her name is Nikki Balch. She is the radio host of The Beat 925. She has been on the radio for 12 years. Always wants to start the important conversation surrounding social justice and having overcome struggles of her own. Nikki now uses her voice and influence to share the challenges he has overcome to promote self-acceptance as part of the body positivity movement. Give it up for Nikki Balch. Okay, our next guest, Balarama Holness. He's won a Grey Cup championship with the Montreal Alouettes back in 2010. I was going to say 2018. I don't remember that. He also ran for mayor of Montreal North with the goal of advancing equitable policies. He is currently in his second year at McGill Law, where he is focusing on international environmental law, human rights, and innovation law. Only? Okay, well, give it up for Balarama Holness. Okay, last but not least, he is part of Overture with the Arts. The man with the focus. He is now on a tour for Black History Month, talking to students, talking to our youth. Omari Newton is a professional actor, writer, slam poet, MC, and graduate of Concordia University. His work can be found on television. I've seen a couple of them. Film, stage, or radio, and his stage work in Quebec has earned him a number of favorable reviews and awards. We are happy to have him here with us, of course, Omari Newton! All right, okay. So guys, I'm so happy to be with you guys. So we're gonna start, we're gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna go around and ask you guys first. Obviously, we're here for Black History Month. So I'm gonna start with all of you. Omari first, I'm gonna say, what does Black History Month represent to you?
Black History Month to me represents a chance to reflect on our legacy and the contributions that some of our forefathers made and how there are connections between those sacrifices with the struggles that we still face today.
Balarama?
That was a beautiful answer, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
I think it was always interesting to think about Black History Month, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, is like, why do we get a month? I think it's important to understand that Black History Month is an opportunity to reflect how we can see Black history as part of Canadian history. So while we understand that it's part of this month, I think we should also look at more opportunities to the horizon. How can we view Black history as part of Canadian history, as part of our collective identities, and how could we ensure that all Canadians throughout the year understand that Black people are significant contributors to the Canadian economy, to the development of Canada, to our constitution, to our nation. So I think it's more so, let's look to the horizon, let's be more forward-looking and not only see it as February, but also throughout the year. And hopefully in our schools, and our curriculum, and the way that we view Canada.
Can I go with what they said? That was perfect. All of those things, absolutely, and certainly look back at how far we've come and what we have had to overcome to get to this place, and also a reminder of the struggle that is still happening, which I find we're not always talking about in a way where we're reflecting it historically, which is on. So yeah, and all of those things they said.
Okay, so basically you guys said, to continue in the schools, but what's really important is we're all professionals here, so one of the things that's really important is how we navigate a little bit of racism, a little bit of injustices when it comes to being in a professional setting. So how would you deal with racism at work? I'm gonna start with you, Balarama. Have you experienced it? I'm sure you have.
Well, one of the reasons why we launched the public consultation is because of the racism I felt within the municipal party, within Pleasure Montreal and the mayor who's currently in power.
Really?
Oftentimes, minority candidates, and now it's shifted. Prior to, historically, to be black was always viewed as negative. Now, to be black has strong financial, political, social value. Corporations understand that, political parties understand that. So black individuals can be tokenized and instrumentalized. So as a French, Canadian, Jamaican who's bilingual, who went to McGill Law, and a professional athlete, that's a great person to tokenize. So one of the reasons why we have this public consultation is because of that. And whether it's a micro transgression or whether it's something overt and extreme, anytime you do experience racism, you must, for lack of a better term, cut it at the throat right away. If you leave it hanging, you're going to, at times, have it build up, and then you have personal pain and personal anxiety. And the University of Michigan came out with this thing called weathering, which is basically the continued onslaught of racism throughout your life actually is a stressor. And if you look at the life expectancy of Afro-Canadians, it's lower than whites. And one of the reasons is the onslaught of stress of being oppressed continuously, whether it's at work, whether it's at the bank, anywhere you go. So the way, and I view that my view, as soon as you experience it, you have to talk about it, you have to even take it to trial, to the tribunal if you have to, talk to your boss, seek help, ask for friends, and you cannot let it continuously weigh you down. And that is, I think, one strategy, one solution to tackle racism when you feel it. And that's what I did. I didn't wait a year or 2 years. We won the election on November 5th. On the 6th,
You addressed the issue.
I addressed the issue immediately, and now we're having a public consultation, and everyone knows that it was authentic from the start.
Okay, thank you for that. Omari.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I was born in Montreal and now I live in Vancouver, BC, and I don't suffer racial aggressions lightly. Whether it's microaggressions, whether it's
I see a lot of your posts on Facebook.
Oh yeah. I like been trying.
You go in.
Oh yeah, I go in and because to me as an actor, I'm very fortunate in that I've been given a decent sized social media platform. And to me, the only value in having a platform is using it to raise awareness or speak truth to power. So I try to amplify the voices of people who are sharing messages that I think are important, or addressing things on a systemic level. Like for example, in Vancouver, there was this theater awards called the Jesse Awards. And around the time that Oscars So White campaign was happening in America, when they started looking at the systems in place that kept black films or non-white films away from consideration. So this was very much on my mind. And this thing happened where I wrote this play about police brutality. This was in 2008. I started writing it before Black Lives Matter, and it got completely dismissed by the jurors, the granting bodies in Vancouver. But when it came to Montreal, it was nominated for best play, for best script, for best, right? So it's one of those things where you go like, I know it's not a whack play, because in one city they really loved it, and then we looked into it, we found out that the juries were basically like overwhelmingly white. And the way they selected the juries was not with any process. They didn't have anything in place to say we want to have equity of gender or equity of race. So I called it out, and we got a few hundred people to sign an open letter addressing this issue, which forced them to implement policies that changed the way they did business. So to me, anytime I'm faced with an instance of racism, I want to track what is the root of this? Where's the power held, and how can I disrupt that power?
Ooh, I like that. Okay, Nikki, I have to ask you, first of all, have you experienced it in the radio? Because I think what's really not interesting or fun or maybe an advantage is that sometimes you're hidden because you're on the radio.
Yeah.
And so do you ever get that like, oh, she's black when people meet you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Can I use your microphone, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time. People are like, thought you were a skinny white girl. But I have to say, say, that being said, my experience has been very different, and I was a little nervous to speak today because I find Balarama and Omari, I learn from them constantly online, and they've been activists for a long time and are so articulate in the way that they communicate. And I was like, this isn't something I have really spoken about. And when you ask about racism in the workplace, immediately I think about the fact that, first of all, people have to be able to recognize when racism is happening, and that's something that I wasn't able to do for a really long time. First of all, being mixed race, I love my mom, but I didn't grow up with black parents who dealt with anything that I was going to deal with in life, so she couldn't really help me out with that.
So for the people at home who don't know, which one of your parents is black and white, and
my father's black, and I didn't grow up with my father.
Okay.
I knew his family a little bit, but I didn't grow up. I was predominantly surrounded by white people my entire life. So dealing with feeling different because of my skin color, first of all. So a lot of the time as I'm dealing with all of these instances of racism around us that are so clear and blown up and obviously racism, I feel like I stand up and I speak what's true to my heart, but a lot of the time I didn't feel like I was fighting for myself. You know, you don't really feel like you're quite white or quite black. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't until later in my life where I was like, okay, I am a black person, but also struggling with my weight and body image. Also being a female, it's kind of like confusing figuring out like why isn't this happening? Why am I not getting this job? It could be maybe because I'm a female and a male has always been in that role, or maybe it's because of the color of my skin. So for me, it has really been a journey of embracing my own race and understanding what it means to me and how I identify. And then also, once I have that understanding, trying to decide why people may be treating me the way that they are. Because I kind of grew up just thinking I was innately wrong, you know? I didn't think that anybody else was.
Okay, so I have to ask the both of you, because obviously just by looking at the four of us up here, Omari and I are the same color, and then I look at you guys as what, you know, light skin, okay? And I know that I'm adopted, both of my parents are white, they're French Canadian, and I know in that community, in the white community, people are still comfortable saying mulatto, still comfortable saying light skin, saying to me, you're pretty for a black girl, and me thinking when I was a young kid, that's okay, at least I'm pretty, at least the word pretty was in that phrase. And not realizing that that is a little bit of a form of racism, not even a little, it is racism. And so how is it for you guys today as adults saying, you know, or having people in the past saying, well, you're not really black, you're not the typical black person. Have you ever had that said to you?
It's so funny, I remember someone asked me, Terrence Edwards, I remember like it was yesterday, football player with Winnipeg Warren, he's like, are you black or white? What do you consider yourself? And for me, I'm like, I'm just me. Like I never identified myself as black or white growing up necessarily, because I felt I was just me. I have a twin brother and I like playing sports, and the whole idea of racism comes onto you, I think, later on in life, because I was somewhat harbored because I was into sports and I was somewhat of a good student. And then later on when it comes up, what I realize is that I have privilege, because when I go into a corner store with my black friend, he might be surveilled more than I will.
Absolutely.
So there is privilege within, we call it colorism. There is privilege when it comes to individuals who are light-skinned, and we do not experience racism the same way as someone who is darker, and we call it intersectionality. So a Muslim woman might experience more discrimination and oppression than a Muslim black woman more than, say, a black woman who's Christian.
Yeah.
Or as now a Muslim woman LGBTQ, even worse. And then you get the intersections. So as you know, I'm having a child soon. I have a girlfriend who's, you know, we're in this great relationship, and I have like this kind of like model view of what it means to be you know, heterosexual, male, light skinned. You have a certain amount of privilege. If I was homosexual, darker, then now the intersection puts you at a different scale.
Okay.
Unfortunately, so you know, so I don't know if that fully answered your question, but we understand that there's a certain amount of privilege when you are a lighter skinned individual, and the difficulty sometimes, and I'll end on this, is when I went to run for mayor of Montreal North, the Haitian population were saying, who the hell are you? You're not Haitian, and you're light skinned.
Yeah.
And I was so convinced that these issues were bigger than that now they respect the grind, and now they've understood that it's authentic. But initially, there was, I would say, a lot of skepticism.
Well, you're talking about Haitian, and I have to say, I'm Haitian, but because I grew up with two French Canadian parents, so many times people would say, well, you're not a real Haitian, and especially that you don't speak Creole, then you're definitely not Haitian. And so, would you say there's also a little bit of hatred, a little bit of racism amongst ourselves?
Oh, absolutely. And I can speak to that. Even someone who grew up with two, black parents who were from Trinidad and Tobago, I felt I was discriminated against my sisters as well when we were young for being articulate and for being good students, which is absurd. I mean, Chris Rock had this joke about it where, people would be like, you speak so well.
And you're speaking English.
You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm a university educated man. Like, how am I supposed to speak, right? And then what's even more messed up is, even within the black community, when I was younger, like it's cool now to be woke, right? But I remember there was a time when, even amongst my black friends, and I used to play football, and some of my black teammates would be like, you talk like a white guy, like, how come you speak the way you do? And I was just like, well, I live in Beaconsfield. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to speak, but I go to school, like I'm educated. So yeah, there's, even within our own community, there's a lot of like interracial discrimination which I think comes from, if you track the roots of colonialism and how we got here, there's a lot of self-hatred that is still embedded amongst black people. I think that these, and the media doesn't help when they feed these tropes of like, to be black and to be cool is to embrace these kind of elements of criminality and to do drugs and to be like, this was considered like cool when I was younger, and it's absurd, but
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with what Balarama was saying as well about the privilege. I find if you're a black man, people have decided who you are and what you're about right away. I find more often than not, people are kind of like, what are you? Like every time I get into a cab, they're like, where are you? I'm like, I am a female human, Derek, settle down. It doesn't matter what I am. But it definitely comes with privilege, and like Omari said, with the way it's presented in the media, with the way light skin is presented and made to look and seem and feel very beautiful compared to dark skin. I think it's getting better, but I know like a lot of my dark skinned friends still are not seeing themselves represented the way that light skinned people sort of are romanticized in media, I guess.
Did you want to add to it?
No, I thought that was
You're good? Okay, so I have to ask you something. I'm going to go a little bit on the personal side. So you are a big promoter of blackness, Black History Month, all of that. You married a white woman. And you married a white woman. And so there are a lot of people who are saying, how could you be so pro-black and marry white? So explain that and how you feel about that.
Sure. Well, it's funny. I always found that argument quite absurd because to me, the struggle that our ancestors went through for acceptance and equality was to give people the choice to be individuals and marry who they choose and to love who they choose. So to me, I think the fact that, finding a partner who you connect with as a soulmate and who you love of any race is a miracle, right? And I think if you find that individual who you connect with and you love on a personal level who really, really gets it, to limit the possibility of that real connection over something as biologically superficial as race would be ridiculous. And that would be my response. And I look at I have an amazingly blended family where I have a beautiful niece and nephew. My older sister married a white Italian man, and part of my family, my blood, is mixed race. So the idea that I'm married outside of my race and that it devalues my commitment to the cause or devalues my blackness is ridiculous when within my own family there are mixed race children.
I agree with Omari, and I love your wife for the record. I love her. She's a fabulous woman. But I can also see how it stings, like further to what we were speaking about with the difference between light skin and dark skin. When dark skinned women, especially, like you're far less likely to see a dark skinned woman dating a white man than you are to see a dark skinned man dating a white woman. And you're far less likely to see a dark skinned woman be portrayed as beautiful or sexy on TV than you are a black man.
Right.
So when you're a dark skinned woman and you're dealing with all of these feelings and things, and then you see a man who is hopefully supposed to find you attractive because you're the same type of people, and a white woman dates him, it hurts a little bit. I agree you have to date who you love, but I can see where the feelings come up there and why some people struggle with that too.
But there are a lot of people who can't stand to see a black woman, dark-skinned black woman, dating a white man because then they call her a sellout, a fake, or so how do you feel about that?
you have to date who you love, but I just can see where it brings up emotions in people, where they already feel like they're not enough to other races, and then your own race too is choosing to date somebody else. You have to marry who you love. Like, I would never try to convince anybody about anything else, but I can understand where that sort of like hurt and frustration comes from, I guess.
I'll marry?
I'll let you. Go ahead. Well, I was just gonna add, what I always find hilarious on a personal level is like my mom wanted me to marry a black woman, right? Most black moms want you to marry. And I would always say to my mom, like, you act like there was this like lineup of women trying to date me in the first place. like I was not cool. Like, I say this as a joke, and I say this, with some degree of pain as well, but when I was younger, sisters weren't necessarily checking for the brother with glasses that was into comic books and Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I played football and stuff, but like nerd culture now is more mainstream and cool, but like, I was a bit of a weirdo. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
really? You were a bit of a weirdo? Akila?
Ask my twin. So it's just funny to me that this idea as though I had this like mass selection, and I was like, nope, let me choose this one. Like, there was like 4 people on earth that could deal with this.
Yeah, but I have to say, I completely understand where you're coming from. And then on the opposite side, growing up as the only black girl in a family of all white people, I remember when I came back, because we lived overseas, we lived in Egypt, we lived in Israel, and I remember when we came back, I was going to Dawson at the time, and I was hanging out in the atrium, and everybody there was black, and all the black were hanging out together, the Greeks were hanging out together. It was so segregated compared to what I experienced going to the American school overseas. Mm-hmm. And I remember bringing back home like maybe 6 friends, and they were all black, and my mom was like, oh mon Dieu, you're beaucoup noir ici, and her just like verbally saying this to me, be like, there's so many black people. So, and like her like seeing the opposite side of it, say, well, when I started dating black guys and all that, she's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to get used to this. And she adopted a black girl, 2 black girls, my sister and I. So, and that was her view. Well, she's like, what?
Well, like, I agree with this because like my very existence rests on the fact that you could marry love blindly, right? Because my father's Jamaican and my mother's French Canadian, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Wow.
So I agree 100%. And I don't think that love should be based on some form of like social, political, religious, or race-based equation. If you fall in love, you fall in love. Now around that, families will try to like rupture that, right? You've seen like those famous like Disney movies and stuff.
Yes.
Like, Mowgli and the Pocahontas and all that kind of stuff. And I was in Egypt for a year, and in Egypt, you are not supposed to marry with people who are lower socioeconomically than you are. Yeah. So there are structures, and obviously Coptic Christians in Egypt will never marry a Muslim. And so there are these divisions, and I think that in Canada, with this kind of open mind, open heart, more equitable society, we would hope that we move beyond the ideas of like race and those divisions. And if you want to marry someone who you love, it's regardless of all of those other factors, you advance with that. And that's why I'm here, I guess.
I just want to mention really quick, because when I was speaking, I was very much speaking like for black skin girls and the struggles that I see, but as
black skin girls,
dark skin girls, I'm so sorry, dark skin girls, but as an interracial human being, I love seeing mixed race couples, because no matter what relationship I'm in, it's going to be mixed race technically. So I love it. There's like a Facebook group for mixed race couples, and I love seeing it, because I do, I'm a product of one, so I love it, but I just can understand how it can bring up a lot of like feelings for a lot of people.
So, okay, so I have so many questions, there's so many things to talk about. So many things to talk about. Okay, so one of the things that I find interesting, and well, I'll say this, okay? So I realized I was black when I was 13. Hold on, I'll explain what that means in just a second. I realized I was black when I was 13. Not because I looked in the mirror and one day I was like, whoa, my skin is dark. I always knew, obviously, I was black. But I realized that I was different from everyone else. I was on a lower scale, and it was because a friend of mine, I had told her that I liked this little boy. His name was Danny Frezza, and I really liked him, white Italian boy. And she goes, I don't know if he likes black girls. And it was in that moment I realized, oh, I'm completely different. I'm not like you. And that to this day affects me. And so what moment in your life made you realize you were different? and maybe you had to like, you know, skate, because my personality is huge to compensate for the fact that I'm black. I used to do that. Now I'm good with it, but I used to do that. And so at what point in your life, or maybe it never happened to you, but at what point in your life were you like, I gotta do this because of my skin color, I gotta be better, I gotta be on top?
Yeah, there were for sure a couple of moments. Number one, I was called the N-word in grade 1 by a girl in my school. So I went home and I'm like, Mom, what does this mean? And she's like, ugh. Like, and she's like, how do I have this conversation? I don't know. It was also later, and I was like super like free spirit, outgoing kid. Like my plan was to be Beyonce or Oprah for sure. And it was, I remember we were doing a play in school. It was The Wizard of Oz. And I was like, I'm for sure going to be able to be Dorothy because I've been practicing my singing and I'm going to be great on stage. And my teacher was like, you don't look like Dorothy and you won't be allowed to be Dorothy, but you can sing backstage for her. So the girl on stage can lip sync and you can be backstage and sing for her, for real. And that was sort of the first moment where I'm like, shh, this is going to be a bit more of a struggle than I thought, yeah.
I wish I could say it wasn't like that as a professional actor, but that stuff happens still.
Yeah.
Sadly.
But do you experience a lot of racism as an actor? Is there a lot of rejection?
Well, it's more systemic and passive racism. Sandra Oh told this great story. Like Sandra Oh, you know, Asian actress, huge star. She'd been the lead on Grey's Anatomy for multiple seasons, and she said her agent sent her this script for the current show she's doing now, which is what's it called? Killing Eve. So she's the lead actress on Killing Eve, and she said her agent sent her this script and said, "There's this project, check it out." She read it, and she said to herself, she called her agent and said, "Well, which role is for me? I didn't see the Asian girl role." And her agent is like, "Eve, like you're reading for the lead role."
Wow.
But that's how deeply embedded the racism is, that a star, a TV star like Sandra Oh couldn't fathom that a producer would send her a script where she's written a lead role that didn't specify race. So it's just, as an actor, that's just how it is.
Okay, so you mentioned systemic racism. Obviously, that's a topic that we're going to be covering today. I was recently at a friend's house, and we were talking about systemic racism. Does it exist? Does it not exist? And there's still people out there who believe it does not exist. And they are being really truthful in their answers when they're saying it doesn't exist. And even if I explain, or I've been in a situation where I was surrounded by white people, and I'm explaining how on my way home I get pulled over just to check who's in the car. Oh yeah, me too. One time I was driving, and it's like, no, don't take that away from me. Don't make it seem like it's okay and we're at the same level. So systemic racism, is it real? I'm gonna start with you, Balram.
But just to answer your previous question.
Yeah.
Okay, the previous question, when you speak, like, when did you realize you were
Yes.
black? All right?
Yes.
So it's kind of important because it kind of like gives you a little bit of image of like where I'm from. So when I was in grade 7, in Sec 1, my parents moved to Boisbriand. Okay, so Boisbriand is obviously...
Just a little bit further than Laval.
Yeah, and it's very, very Caucasian. Prior to that, I was in a classe d'accueil, a lot of immigrants. So there, you don't even realize that you're different, because everyone's different.
Yeah.
When I moved to Boisbriand, I'm walking on the street one day, and a little child, maybe 4 years old, looks up at me and says, "Tu as de la boue dans la face."
Wow.
So, but he doesn't know, right? This kid's like 4.
Say it in
So
English.
it means like you have mud on your face.
Yeah.
He doesn't know that this is my color, because this is the first time he's probably seen someone who is like white. So, or who's darker. So what happened when I was living in Boisbriand, my name is Balarama Holness, I'm a vegetarian, and I'm the darkest guy there. So and I have curly hair. And I have a twin brother whose name is Jagannatha.
Oh boy.
Who's dark with curly hair, who's vegetarian. That means that when you go to the houses, you can't really eat their food. They don't know how to pronounce your name, and your hair is curly. Or all the kids have that cut where it's shaved on the side with straight hair coming down. So and then my father's absent. So he's not there saying, these are your roots, this is who you are. So now I want a white name, I want straight hair, and like now I'm kind of conforming. What happens is when you become an adult, you realize that, oh no, the value and the richness of my culture is extremely beautiful, and I love who I am. And I think that you mentioned, women who want to adopt like the black hair, like that's becoming more and more a trend, and what's happening on social media is becoming of, let's say, like not social media rather, the media of degrading the black principle is kind of fading. And the more you kind of dig, and I'll end on this, and it's really, really important. At McGill Law, I take a class, it's called Cultural Heritage Law. It's talking about all the artifacts that were in Africa that were then looted and plundered during colonialism. These same artifacts are in Germany, are in England. They're analyzing them, the sculptures, especially in Nigeria. They're more accurate, more beautiful than at the highest time of the Renaissance in Europe. So while African people are being degraded in these countries, we understand and they understand that we had amazing cultures, arts, castles, kings, queens, and these artifacts are in these museums. So the biggest lie of the last 400 years is that black people are not beautiful, that we didn't have a culture, that we don't have a history, and they know it because all of their museums have all of our culture and all of our art, and now you're in these law schools at McGill, and we're trying to find a way to get this art back to these countries. So the idea that, you know, had a weird name and I'm vegetarian and I have a different skin color, when you're trying to conform to white colonialism, you want to conform and then you challenge or you doubt yourself, but then you figure out one point is like, no, like the richness and the culture and the history is here, and then you can like love yourself and you can like ultimately love other people in your surroundings regardless of color. Yeah. So to get to systemic racism, it's like it really starts with us. And I'll go to that question to say like it exists and we can unpack that, but minus that, healing the wounds within our community, the fractures within our community, that is step one to solving systemic racism. No policy, not Trudeau, no politician, not Legault could do anything to remedy those things. If people start voting in blocks, if people start loving each other, the communities coming together, regardless of Jamaican, Haitian, or Bayesian or whatever, then we could start advancing towards that. But the first thing is realizing like, okay, yeah, black is beautiful. And I don't think like we fully understood that black is beautiful and the wealth and the richness is in our culture, and we haven't gotten there yet. And I think the N-word was, I won't go there, but the N-word was a big hurdle to getting that because we're still calling ourselves the name that used to be called to us to identify ourselves as objects and animals. So we're still not free of mental slavery. DJ was playing Bob Marley before. We're still not away from that mental slavery in my view, and to valuing the black principle, which I think is coming along slowly but surely.
You're good? Yeah. Everybody's like, whoa. Omari?
I realized I never answered your question about when I learned I was black, but mine will be quicker. I only appreciate now as an adult like how black my household was. Like my dad is sitting right here, and literally as a kid, they were like, hey, you should read this Harriet Tubman coloring book. Like straight up. We had like the Harriet Tubman kids book, the Malcolm X kids book, and I think the first album my dad bought me, true story, was like Public Enemy's Funeral Black.
Yes, Daddy!
My dad was like, you should listen to this album. And I remember my parents being like, hey, there's this great movie, Do the Right Thing. I was like 8. You should watch Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
And then now I always laugh. I go back home and I go through my parents' library, and it's like Eldridge Cleaver, you know, Black Power, the autobiography of Malcolm X, like. Because, you know, obviously my parents came up at a time in the civil rights era, like in the 1960s, where they lived through the preachings of Dr. King and Malcolm X. So I think because they had those politics, they tried to instill them in their children, and I came to know I was black the second I was out the womb.
I love it. You did a good job, Daddy. You did a good job. And Nikki, did you want to add to that?
No, I think it's
All good. Okay. So I have to ask you. You mentioned the N-word. It's rampant in the music industry for the youth. Okay. So I know, Omari, you're always out. You're in schools. You're talking to a whole bunch of students. How would you? I'm trying to find the proper way here. Because kids are still singing it, but it's just Martin, it's just in a song, it's okay. Are you okay with the word being used in songs?
So it's funny that you asked that question today. We went to a school, I won't name the school today, and the last question that was asked, a white kid raised their hand in a very black or very mixed school and said, is it okay, or why can't white people say the, and he just said the word. He outright said, and I swear it almost caused a riot. Like, it got crazy people, like kids were upset. I had to calm people down on the microphone. Like it was a very, very tense moment, right? And what I told this kid was, look, I personally do not use that word, right? Personally, I don't. I have cousins in the States and like Florida and New York who do use that word.
When they see a friend.
They've reclaimed it as a term of endearment, and they use it amongst each other because they've reappropriated it. But what I explained to them is, if you understand the roots and origins of that word as a way of dehumanizing black people from a time when we were quite literally considered property, like we were not considered human beings. If your ancestors lived through that pain and you choose to reappropriate that word, I understand, even if I choose not to. But a white person who does not have that legacy in their family does not have a right to hold claim to that word.
Okay.
So that's my answer.
Yeah, I agree with Omari, and I'm really curious to know what Balarama has to say, because I feel like he feels differently, and I'm curious to know if I will feel differently after I hear him speak as well. But I tend to have always felt like, I don't use the word personally, but comfortable with artists using it in their music, because like Omari said, it was them taking the power back for the word. And that's why I sort of have always like accepted that, but I feel like you feel differently about it, right?
Well, like, if you just take hip hop, for example, hip hop has degraded since the 80s, right?
No.
Like, so we've appropriated the word, we're using the word, but when you listen to the lyrics, it's like beep, beep, beep,
Yes.
and it's not necessarily endearment. If you replace that word by say the name John, what would the rappers want to do to John? It's very violent, brutal things. So the term of endearment sentence, I've heard that before, but if you just replace a name with that person, it's no longer a term of endearment. It's also used as a term to vitiate and to kill and to do all forms of things in music. Now, if hip hop would have ascended since the 80s and that term of endearment became a term of empowerment, I'd say all the power to you. But we've been...
You don't think there's a few artists who are using it?
Oh yeah, for sure, right? Like, I'm talking mainstream, and even the mainstream artists still do have content that is still questionable.
Right.
And there is underground positive hip hop, but by and large, pop culture and hip hop culture, I think, has gone in the wrong direction. And if you're in that word, I think, take out the word, the mentality around that whole era and that culture, I feel, is problematic to the ascension of the Black community. We can go on that, but what do you think? Like,
I know, right?
I will say, I always find myself like, defending rap music. Like, hip hop music to me is like your homeboy from back in the day who like took a wrong turn, and everyone's like, yo, what's up with your boy? And you're like, no, but you don't trust me. Like, he used to be great. He's just hooked on crack right now. But I feel that way. I feel very defensive of hip hop, and I think there are certain rappers who, when the N-word comes out of their mouth, I feel the love and the thought behind it. Like there are people like Killer Mike, who has a very interesting show called Trigger Warning now. It's on Netflix.
So good.
So interesting, right?
Yeah.
He uses the word. He recently had an appearance on Power 105, The Breakfast Club, where he was just dropping knowledge left, right, and center. And I understand when someone, particularly from the States, because us as Black Canadians have a different cultural legacy than African Americans in the States. It is a different culture, right? If you're from the South, or if you're from, the Bronx or whatever, that word has a different meaning to you. So I would never want to be in a position where I tell someone from that culture they can't say the word, but I, as a Canadian Black man, choose not to.
Okay. You mentioned Killer Mike. Very interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen the show, but in one of the episodes, he goes to a school and he's talking to the students, and they're like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do when you get older? And one of the Black kids says, I want to be the president. And Killer Mike is like, you're never going to become the president. And he's really straightforward, and he's like, you're never going to do this, but you need to learn some trade work. And so what would be, he straight up says this, okay? Now, obviously he was, there's a little bit of comedy in there too. So what would you say to the young Black community here in Montreal? We're not going to compare ourselves to the United States. Here in Montreal, is it okay to always say, you could be whatever you want to be? You could be the president of, the Prime Minister of Canada if you wish. Is it okay to go in and say this to kids? Black kids.
I say you say it to the kids, and you're really honest in that you're going to have to work 20 times harder than everybody around you to get there.
Yeah.
That's what I was actually told that when I was really young, for multiple reasons, and I worked my ass off, and I'm actually now the first ever lead host of a radio morning show
Your
in
name
Montreal.
comes first.
Actually, I mean, I can't confirm this, but probably the first minority female in all of Canada, I'm assuming, to have that job, and there are only a handful of women who have done it. Truth is, I had to work harder than everybody around me to get there.
Yeah, I think this kind of big dream innocence is worth it. Like, both my parents at what time were on welfare. My dad lived in a 3.5 with me and my twin in social housing. So there's a very thin line between being a professional athlete, being at McGill Law. I'm gonna have more degrees than LeBron James has rings. By the end of this, I'll have 5 degrees and a master's. So I feel like I like the idea of dreaming big and being convinced of that, and no one should burst that bubble. I was convinced. I started playing football when I was 18.
Wow, late.
Yeah, like, cause I saw some dude on TV who was my size and my height and had like light eyes, and I'm like, yo, that's me. And I was convinced that I would be able to go to the league. Like, I was convinced. Then I was sure it was the Olympics or the CFL. Like, I was like dead. Like, you couldn't convince me otherwise. So if someone came and said, oh, hell no, you know how hard it is? 0.00003% get in the CFL.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And I actually have my ring on me. So then I won a championship ring with the Alouettes in 2010.
Show that ring, show that ring, yeah!
So like, if you told me like, and you know, I was a bad kid rapping on bus stops between like the age of 17 and 19, and at one point I popped out of it, but don't crush that, you know, Will Smith's Pursuit of Happiness when his kids trying to get the basket. Don't crush that innocence. Assist and have that community support, and then the sky's the limit. So Killer Mike says a lot of good things about like banking and finance and stuff, but I wouldn't pop that bubble and tell a kid to go be a plumber. I'd be like, yeah.
I would agree with what both of them are saying. I think you should not, to go back to what we were initially talking about, I don't think you should bust the bubble of youth, but I think it's important to have them fully understand the nuances of the business they want to follow. And there's a great sports journalist, this guy's, well, Stephen A. Smith, although he's kind of become a parody of himself lately, but Stephen A. Smith has accomplished a lot as a journalist, and he once said, he tells kids, you can make the NBA, there's a chance, but why do you want to make the NBA? And normally they're like, oh, I want to be rich, I want to have cars, whatever, and he explains to them, look, the odds of you making the NBA are this, but if you do a degree in journalism like I did, I got a nice house, I got a nice car, so he breaks it down to them and says, like, everything you want is attainable, just open your mind and expand it to the different pathways you can take to get there. So that's what I would tell a kid.
Okay, very nice. We're gonna keep it going.
Yes.
We're still good for time? Oh, she's like, we got time. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about Montreal. So how long have you lived in Montreal now?
A total of like almost 6 years.
Okay, so quite a bit of time. So when I'm out in the community, I used to live in Burgundy while I was going to Dawson, and that's where I met my husband. But while I was in Burgundy, I noticed that, you know, because I didn't know what Burgundy was until I was in it. And then I realized, ooh, it's not such a great community, and it was problematic at the time that I was there. I was there in the 90s. And we were in a new condo because my parents had built a condo right there. And then I realized there was a lot of hate, a lot of poverty, a lot of fighting, a lot of drugs, a lot of negativity. And so what would you say right now for the Montreal community to try and come up? Are we well on our way? Are we doing better? Are we okay? Are the young kids of Montreal thinking in the right way? What would you say about that?
I think you're gonna have an amazing answer to this.
Well, because this is the thing, right? Burgundy is now hot.
Yes,
right?
because it's Griffintown.
Because it's Griffintown.
Yeah.
So what I would tell Montrealers is that when you have a community like Burgundy, is to do everything you can to own it, to put your foot down. Now in Little Burgundy there was the Black Community Center that got broken. So that got torn down, and
it's still just torn down.
Yeah, so that should have caused riots, right? And that should have put the population, the Black population in Little Burgundy at City Hall and said, build me a new one.
Yeah.
The same thing happened in London. There was...
Okay, but why aren't they doing that? Why isn't the Black community rallying? What's happening?
Yeah, and I think that's the magic question is, why is it that Parliament is underrepresented, or that our kids don't have proper education, or that racial profiling continues?
Yeah.
And you need a Black spring, you need a positive revolution.
And you need Black people at the top to be making changes.
It's opposite. It's basically grassroots local movements that end up advancing equity. If you have a lot of black people at the top that are in power that don't do anything, what you need is grassroots community organizations, organizing sports camps, organizing events to keep these kids off the streets, organizing basketball camps, the community to rally. If there is a Chinatown, then call it an Africa town, get funding and put your foot down and have a stake in this community. Now with gentrification, it's completely dispersed. And now the Little Burgundy is no longer. But had those places been, I would say, stamped, then you'd have a chance to keep it. But how we're gonna emancipate the Afro-descendant community, I think obviously it starts with youth. One of the reasons, and back to Killer Mike in this situation, why I went to McGill Law is because during my master's degree, it would say low-income kids get low-quality information. So I was like, oh my God, I got robbed of quality schooling in my high school. Or the school system reinforces the idea that black people are inferior. So in my view, it would be reinforcing the education system. You have to start at the age of basically like 4, ensure the kids have proper education so that they go through the system and then they actually become productive members of society. But this takes a village to build. I got some people to the CFL. It took me 5 years of constant training and following, and they arrived at the league. But this takes a full community. So broken homes and obviously drugs, police brutality, crime, and all these intersecting factors have what you have, and there's no real answer.
I mentioned Burgundy, but it's not just Burgundy. There's obviously a whole bunch of other neighborhoods here in Montreal. Just because I live there, that's why I said that. But in one of the things that you said, you mentioned people rallying and coming together and creating these great environments for kids. Trevor Williams has the Trevor Williams Kids Foundation. He's doing something great for kids. You have people who are trying to do things, but do you think it's too late?
No, it's never too late. And I would bring it back to hip hop for a moment, is that I'll give you a great example. 21 Savage, y'all know who he is? You saw him?
No, I just found out this weekend.
Okay, good.
What happened,
So
the trouble he got in.
you know him because he got taken and by ICE and they said we're gonna deport him.
Right.
You know what his lawyer said? He is a role model. That's our issue. 21 Savage is the role model. There are no role models.
Yeah.
The role models, he should be a role model. People who are excelling in different areas of our society should be role models. But when pop culture has 21 Savage as a role model, that's hard to contest with.
Yeah.
So in the field of education, they say you have schooling, what you learn in school, and education outside of education.
Yeah.
So the education young black males are getting is 21 Savage, it's Tekashi 6ix9ine, it's Lonzo Ball.
Here in Montreal too, that's where,
I lived in Egypt for a year.
Yeah.
Those are still the role models because this pop, like Kanye said, we're the new rock stars.
Yeah.
So they're everywhere. Like we're basically an American state in terms of influence. Not one young black man can name me one Canadian black artist, right? We don't listen to that stuff. So having positive community role models, what you're doing in schools is phenomenal. You're opening kids' eyes to possibly like a new path of possibilities.
Larry?
The question about what I would tell a youth in Montreal, I would tell a youth anywhere, to echo what you said, I think ownership should be your goal. Having a stake in what you're doing. Don't try to get a job, start a business. Get out of renting and get into paying a mortgage as soon as you can. And I mean that. I mean, if you have to live 3-4 people to a 1-bedroom, which I did when I first moved to Vancouver, the less you can pay of someone else's mortgage to save up for a down payment for your own, the better. The sooner you start investing in stocks, the better. And this is stuff that...
Well, that's something a lot of black people do. A lot of black people are still living in apartments. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Still living on rent. A lot of black people don't own property.
I know.
And so you got Brian Smith, the financial guy out there trying to help people become a little bit more financially literate. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, one of the biggest ways that wealth, the generational wealth, is passed down is through real estate. And I don't know if a lot of people might not know about this idea of redlining that happened in the States, but there was a time when there were certain areas in America where black people were not allowed to own homes. And I mean, we can take it back even further. If you go back to the days of slave plantations when slaves couldn't own anything, you were working on your master's plantation, you weren't getting paid, right? Think about the billions of dollars in generational wealth that black people were shut out of that still have an impact today because of colonialism. So to me, the most revolutionary thing you can do as a young black person is to own stuff, because we were shut out of it for so long. And I think anybody, if you just mess around with like a compound wealth calculator for a little bit, and you'll understand how powerful investing is. Or anybody, you just look at, I mean, any real estate chart basically in North America over the last 30 years. Right? America had the worst financial crisis ever in 2008. Right? One of my boys in 2010 bought 2 houses in Atlanta and tried to talk me into doing it. And at the time I was like, there you go.
His aunt did that,
There you go. And at the time I was like, are you crazy? I'm gonna drop this is how stupid I am. I was like, I'm gonna drop $60,000 for some place that I don't wanna live in Atlanta.
Yeah.
You know how much my boys sold those places
That's
for? $200,000 each in 2019. And these are things that like Trump tells his kid these things. Warren Buffett tells his kids these things. And I think we need to start passing these messages on to our youth so they get in on this game.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what you guys think. This is actually a question, but when we're talking about these areas that are struggling, and it's a little bit different in bigger cities, maybe like Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver, because they're large cities with a lot of opportunities, but I think of smaller places like Nova Scotia. So where is the line between telling a child to go, like leave, get out of here and go do something better, or stay here and fight for us?
Well, like for me, I left Montreal when I was 19 or 20 to go to Ottawa U.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I went to Ottawa U. I got lucky because my friends were kind of going down a different path, and I went to Ottawa U, University of Ottawa, to play football. And to tell you how kind of austere or how disciplined I need to get, I got suspended for 2 years. My first year I did some wild stuff, got suspended from my football team. My second year got suspended. My third year, I broke my hand on someone's face, then lost my season. My fourth year, I ended up playing. So Ottawa, and my coach was like, what's wrong with you? Right? Like, but so growing
What was
up,
happening?
so because high school was such a kind of like, my end of high school was kind of bad influences, that Ottawa was able to kind of ground me, and then I ended up going to the CFL and had a better environment, if you will. But sometimes it's good to leave your area, but when you tell that to people in Montreal North, I love Montreal North. They don't want to leave these areas. So once again, it's about owning that area, and you don't only own it maybe from a real estate perspective, but psychologically you feel connected to the area, to the community. And it's hard to deracinate people or to like deracinate from these areas and having them leave.
To uproot them.
Yeah.
But go on.
But if I could even add to that, even leaving your area, even from a local standpoint, can have a big impact. And I'm thinking back to when I used to play football, and obviously not at the same level you did, but I played for the North Shore Lions. And if people know about the local Montreal football scene, the North Shore Lions is when you're like 13, 14, all the West Island teams become one kind of super team, right? So on that team, you had guys from Amma Bay, guys from Sunnybrook, guys from just all over the West Island, right? So I was living in Kirkland. So I was playing football with dudes who were in Sunnybrook and in Amma Bay, and long story short, a lot of my homies that were like in the West Island but in different kind of environments ended up in jail. Some of them ended up dead a few years later. Like, it's crazy how the difference between an upbringing in Sunnybrook or Amma Bay versus Beaconsfield or Kirkland even can have an impact. So I would tell people that, like, you don't even have to go far if you want to find an environment that is more conducive to your growth. You just have to like not fall into the traps, if they're negative ones, that your homies are kind of doing.
But it's easier said than done for some people in certain communities. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, owning, we don't even support our own. I mean, so many black people don't support black people.
Sure.
And so it's hard to make ourselves get to the monter à un niveau, like to get to a level where, we want to be. And so one of the things that was interesting in Taylor Wright, once again, he had to spend the whole 48 hours trying to just eat, sleep, and talk everything black owned, and was almost impossible. He couldn't get around town because he didn't want to get into any car that wasn't black owned. He didn't want to eat any food that wasn't black owned. He didn't want to do anything that was black owned. But he ended up like struggling. So what can we do to make sure that the black community is supported, that we support each other? How can we support each other? From restaurant owners to hotel owners to this, how? Why aren't we on the map like that?
Okay, so there's a few things. So there's economic capital, there's social capital, and there's political capital. In my view, the reason why I'm involved politically is I believe that policies, programs, and various resources from the state can go to support these various issues. A good example, the federal government just gave $20 million for these Black initiatives. The federal government is also having a public consultation on systemic racism. Heritage Canada has more new funds that are going to fund Black initiatives. So before we could arrive, it's very easy to say, I actually bought my home. That home came from CFL money. You have to put, say, 5% down. Now it's even higher. They take your income versus how much your home owns versus how much you spend. It's very difficult to buy a home, extremely difficult. However, if I could reform the curriculum to ensure that you're represented in the classroom, if I could ensure that you have access to health, which in Montreal North doesn't happen, if I could ensure that your CPA, which is a Centre de Petite Enfance, has adequate educational professionals and psychoeducators to assist these young kids, if I can cover all my bases in society to ensure that you have access to sports, leisure, there's also des déserts alimentaires, which means that you have to travel at great distances just to get a broccoli. So if you look at it, you're almost like in checkmate in a lot of different ways. Plus you have the erosion of Black culture on Black culture, which I view as hip hop. So you look at the scale and you're like, oh my God, this is almost like checkmate. In order to remedy that, I think it can come from policy. That's why I view politics and political capital as important. Now imagine if you had City Hall as 103 elected officials. Imagine if you had 20 of them from the Black community. Trust that programs, access to arts.
And how many are there now?
One. No, two. One new, he just got elected in a partial election in Saint Michel, and there's 2 or 3, and one as an independent. So there's just 2 Black women, and there's only 1 Black male who is a city councilor from Saint Michel. But when you are 3 amongst 103, you have to roll with the punches and you can't really change policy. Now, if you had a significant group of people at the provincial level saying we want more funding for education in communities on the periphery of the city, and we want access to more healthcare. So in Montreal there's like 1 clinic, and you're basically screwed if you get hurt or if you're sick. So there's 20,000 Haitians in Montreal North, and there's 1 clinic, right? So there's not the proper resources that are allocated from the state. So yeah, you need a grassroots movement, but before even political, if you ask me, do you want 100 real estate agents or 200, or do you want 200 young political activists trying to get elected? Any day I'll take the political activists trying to get elected. Because this generational wealth, there's no trickle down economics. Even if a few Black people get really wealthy, it doesn't mean that the whole Black community will somehow get wealthy. So get political capital, educational capital, social capital, and the economy will flow through that.
Yeah, but you're giving us a lot of information that I think a lot of people didn't know. I think a lot of us are not doing our homework. I think that's part of the problem as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. What was the specific question?
We're talking about,
Yeah.
Black people supporting Black people.
Right.
How do we come up? How can we own more things?
Well, I think it's, if you have a pride instilled in you in your Blackness and in your community, you will actively seek out ways to support Black businesses. And I think if once you instill that sense of pride, you'll feel that obligation almost to support Black people who are trying to come up. But the other angle I want to look at too, though, is I think we have to flip a switch in our mind as Black people and realize that things are available to us if we focus on them. Just a quick example, I took an Uber yesterday, and a young brother, this guy named Mohammed, gave me a lift. And he was breaking down for me how, he works Uber on the weekends to pay for his education in school. He takes that money and he rents a parking lot and runs a car wash in the summer times. He's just doing his thing. And he's like, I'm a Black Muslim Somalian guy. That he knows racism exists, he knows all these problems, but you can get it in this shared economy if you want it. And I think a lot of us just need to focus on that right? Aside from the politics of it, just focus on what you can do actively for yourself too.
Just one thing I'll mention, because you mentioned that somebody had tried to just use Black-owned businesses
Yes.
for an entire day and how difficult it is. Something that I make an effort to do, because it is sometimes very difficult, is also support other minorities and also make sure I'm supporting women as well, because the more diversity we see among people whom we consider to be successful is good for all of us.
Well, Mary, I'm going to talk to you about Overture with the Arts. This year the focus is Black women. And so, first of all, 2019, where do you think the Black woman is?
I think the Black woman has always showed up throughout history, whether it's like Angela Davis or Harriet Tubman or Marianne Shadd, Viola Desmond. I think Black women have showed up and showed out for a very long time, and I'm really fortunate to have grown up in a house filled with strong Black women, from my twin sister to my older sister to my mom. So I think the Black woman is in an amazing place, and that's why this year Overture's school presentation is called BRAWL, which stands for Black Revolutionary Activist Women List. So we're going around through schools. We're doing 50 presentations in 4 provinces and 8 different cities, preaching the gospel of the contributions that Black women have made. So that's our way of kind of giving back.
Valderrama, Black woman?
Black
The
women are
Black
beautiful.
female?
It's very interesting that you're saying that, and when I think about, like, we have this person called Elvira. She's
I don't
a
even
young.
know who that is.
Yeah, I know you don't, because I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's a young. She's from Rwanda. She has her MBA. Prior to that, she was in biopharmaceuticals, and she was behind the petition, assisting with the petition. There's a lot of young Black women who are doing a lot of amazing things that we don't always see. Oftentimes when I go to panels, for example, I was at a panel for Black History Month at Concordia, it was all women. Very few Black men were in the room. So, Black Lives Matter was obviously started by Black women.
Yes.
With the petition, 20,000 signatures, and we have Melanie who's here actually, who's not Black, but she's for the cause, for what we're doing. So whether Black, white, or otherwise, women are leading the charge. And oftentimes when you go to my Facebook and you look at the pictures from the collection of the signatures, we're at Jamaica Day, it's
all
women.
Yeah.
It's women, so they're leading the charge. The 20,000 signatures, the one who collected the most was a French-Canadian woman. So the Black males were few and far between when it came to actually advancing the issue with the movement that we've done in Montreal in Action. So I view Black women as the backbone for most of these movements, and without them, I don't even know where we would be. We wouldn't be having a public consultation. That's for sure.
Nikki, would you agree?
I agree 100%. I have no idea where we would be, and it's so wonderful to see more and more Black women finding their voice, doing that myself, sort of in the midst of that, and seeing so much more representation and people feeling that they can use their platforms to stand out and say, like, this is what's up.
What would you say is the difference, racism today, 2019, versus 2009? Is there an improvement? Is it different? Is it the same kind of racism? Is it the same kind of hatred? Are we dealing with something new?
I think it's more overt, thanks to
Donald Trump.
Thanks in large part to the person who we shall not speak of. But I think racism is truly, it's embedded in the world, really.
Do you think it's more alive today? Do you think because of certain issues that Donald Trump brought to light that we're a little bit more comfortable with it? Is it people that were always racist and it was just now they've been given a voice and it's okay?
I don't think it's more alive. I just think it's more overt.
Okay.
I feel like any Black person knew that there was racism.
Yeah.
It's just before people might smile in your face, and now
they're just telling you in your face.
Yeah, they just smack a MAGA hat on now, just say stuff to you. Interesting. I'm sure most people here have been following this madness with Liam Neeson in the news.
Yes.
Right? So Liam Neeson, who came out and said that a Black man raped his friend, so he roamed many years ago. He roamed the streets looking for any Black bastard to kill.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Before you go on, so I'll give you my opinion on that.
Sure.
Everybody, I got into a fight at work about this. Because so you guys know the story, right? Everybody? No, you do not know the story. Oh, Mary, Liam Neeson, okay? I think it was a recorded interview because you actually hear him saying this. His friend, a female friend, was raped by a Black man. And so when he told her, he went out for about like a week and a half roaming the streets, looking for any black man to attack.
He's a black bastard.
The black bastard.
And he said if he found one, he probably would have killed him.
Yes, he went with a crowbar and he was ready to attack. And so a lot of people say, well, he's so good for coming forward and being so candid and being able to talk about this and saying, you know, and because he did say in the same breath, I apologize for this, I was in a dark place, da 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 da. And then in my head I'm thinking, had my husband, who is dark skinned, stepped on his foot that day, my husband wouldn't be here. So that's why I'm like, I'm not okay with it. And it is racism, and he's not forgiven for it.
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And here, the point that I've been making, because I wrote an article about this I write for a paper called Why You Are Screen Scene for a blog, and I wrote an article expressing my views. And here's what I want to throw out there, and I apologize for the crass analogy I'm going to use. Had Liam Neeson said, my friend was molested by a white woman,
Yeah.
so I walked around in predominantly white female neighborhoods. So I walked by a sorority house with a knife looking to kill any white woman. Would the public right now be going, we should forgive him. We shouldn't, don't cancel him. You should still support his movies.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, you want to talk about racism.
Forget Liam Neeson. Had a black man said that about any white female.
That's not even a conversation. That's not even yeah.
It's like, forget it.
That's not even a conversation.
And even to speak even more to his privilege is the idea he believes he can say something like that and people are supposed to be like, okay, it's cool. Like nobody else is allowed to do that. It's just more proof of the privilege that he has.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that was just my point. It's an example of how passive racism and the idea of white supremacy still exists to this day. That he can say that and it gets national attention and people are dumbfounded that black people are like, he's canceled.
Yeah.
I've had people all day long on Twitter and Facebook coming at me going, why are you being so harsh?
Yeah.
They can't fathom why I wouldn't want to go see movies with a guy who said many years ago, he roamed through neighborhoods looking to kill me.
Yeah. That's exactly, looking to kill me.
That's right.
Nikki, racism today.
I don't know, part of me, I do agree with what Omari said, that it's probably something that has always been there, but we're just seeing a lot more. But I also worry about the fact that we're seeing it so often and what influence that may have on other people. So that worries me that maybe it is more prevalent because people who are sitting at home and feel lonely or feel whatever, see somebody else acting some kind of way and think that that's now appropriate for them to go out and do. So part of me thinks that it could be getting worse because of the influence. I mean, I think influence in any business corporation starts at the top and it trickles down. And I mean, it's Donald Trump. Like, I just can't believe that he's not influencing people who otherwise may have been racist, may have been Liam Neeson, but may have kept their mouths shut.
I have to ask you, I'm going to keep going with you, Nikki. Okay. I'm going to ask you, so your mom is white.
Yes.
And do you think she understands the social issues black people go through?
No, absolutely not.
No. Okay.
Absolutely not. Like I said, it's different for everybody. It's different for light-skinned people as well. I can't say that I understand what it's like to be a black man in some parts of the United States of America. Like, it's completely different. So no, she doesn't know, and she's always been really honest about that and felt really bad about the fact that she didn't really feel like she could educate me and empower me in the way that she wishes she could have. And it's sort of one of her regrets too, maybe not like keeping me a little more in contact with my father's family so that I could learn from them a little bit, but no, she certainly doesn't know. Okay. Absolutely not.
Balanawa?
What's the question?
Does your mom...
Oh, I just wanted to mention one thing. She has seen it. After dating my father, like, I am 32 years old, so I was born in 1986. So she was a white woman dating my black father at the time. So she has, you know, when they wanted to go look at an apartment to rent, he wasn't allowed to go there. When I was hospitalized, we got a kitten when I was really little, and I was severely allergic to kittens and broke out in like hives everywhere. And she took me to the hospital. When my dad showed up, suddenly so did social services to make sure that I wasn't being abused. So she has definitely seen it all, dealing with that in a province like Nova Scotia, but obviously she can't relate in the exact same way.
Your mom is white, and so is she aware of the social issues black people go through, the injustices, the systemic racism? Is she completely aware of that? Does she understand it?
most people are aware of the issues.
Do you believe white people were like, no, I don't see it, I'm not racist, I don't see it?
So that obviously happens, so that's denial.
Okay.
So that's, that's unfortunate
Yeah.
that does happen. But I have faith that a lot of people of European descent do understand the issue, that do care about the issue, especially teachers who teach diverse classes. Like Melanie was here, she teaches people who are indigenous, teaches people who are Chinese, who are black. And I think most people who have interactions with these communities understand their experiences. They don't live them, so it's a different form of understanding. But I think most reasonable people who live in diverse neighborhoods understand that there is discrimination and there is oppression. People who live maybe further outside Montreal or in the boonies, just Sherbrooke, there you go. They have a little bit more trouble because it's not impacting their lives, which is unfortunate.
Mary? Your mom is not white.
Right, yeah.
Growing up with two black parents, completely the opposite of all of us here, were there ever moments, and I know your dad's in the audience, but I don't want you to call them out or anything, but I do. But were there ever moments where you're like, white people them, and then, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
black.
was there ever any like anti-white sentiment?
Yeah, you know what I mean?
No, never ever. We never ever. Of course there was. You even watch mainstream TV. Like you watch the Jeffersons.
Yeah.
One of a black person in professional sport is complaining about white people. That's what we like. We all did at some points.
Yeah.
But obviously it wasn't to the point where we were discriminating against people based on race. My wife's white. My older sister married a white man. I just think my parents were very good at making us aware of the realities of the world. They just never shielded. My mom is a social worker. So her assumption was every time I left the house, I wasn't coming home. She made a point to just let me know how to carry myself and how to minimize the chances of getting in trouble.
Remember you mentioned you're having a baby.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Okay, do you know if it's a boy or a girl?
And we're gonna find out in a month.
In a month, okay. So how are you going to prepare your child in terms of learning about their background? Do you say to your child you're half black, half white? How does that work? Or you just talk about your background and?
Well, the mom is Jamaican and Italian.
Okay.
Obviously Jamaican and French Canadian.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be some form of mixity there.
Yes.
I think that I'll take it the way I did it is not necessarily address it early because of the innocence of just being viewed as human.
Yeah.
Because that's what we should all technically be at, right? Whether your skin color is different. Ideally, this colonialism and this idea that black people were negative and this whole idea of property as mentioned at the beginning. And so this is a kind of a fallacy that we shouldn't even be discussing. Unfortunately, colonialists put us in this category, but I would leave that kind of innocence as long as I can until maybe one day some kid says, hey, your hair is really curly and why is your dad, dark or something. And I think I would leave it at that. And hopefully, and that's why we do this. And I mentioned when he launched this petition, we're doing it for the new generation, for the next generation, so they don't have to deal with the things that we've been dealing with. But I think I would let that one just kind of sit for a moment.
Be innocent, just stay in your innocence.
Yeah, a little bubble.
Possible,
and do a lot of traveling. I've been to 15 different countries, China, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Morocco. I've been all over the world. And when you travel a lot, you're like, why are we bickering about our skin color? Everyone is so different.
Yeah.
So hopefully some global education and some good, I would say
I think it was Mark Twain who said you have to travel to reduce your level of racism.
Yeah, and I think that would help. Yeah, if you just put some white person in Africa, oh my God, they're nice people and they laugh, right? So.
You don't have any kids yet.
I don't have any kids. I'm not pregnant. When I do, I'm gonna hire Omari to educate them.
That's fine. My rates are what? Okay.
Are we okay for time? Yeah. So do you 5-10 minutes? So can I ask the audience? Do you guys have any questions? Let's take a question from the audience. Come on, guys. Yes.
So my question is kind of twofold. One, it sort of comes from, I guess, the sort of global view of Africa. Because obviously we're in North America, so we're talking about North American issues, but where the first part is where our responsibility lies towards the continent of Africa and supporting it. And then the second part of my question is how we view how others sort of address the continent of Africa. So,
Interesting.
That's a question.
I say this somewhat jokingly, but like the first start is for Black people to realize that Africa is a continent, not a country. That's a good start.
Where are you from? Africa?
The funniest thing for me as a professional actor, this happens on the regular. I will get auditions that will say, please have performer prepare an African accent. I swear, I can show them to you all the time. And you sit there going, again, you want to talk about racism and white supremacy. Imagine a white actor getting an email saying, prepare a European accent.
Yeah.
You'd be like, where in Europe? Like, what, like Italian, you want a French one, you want, you know what I mean? But we kind of just get like glossed over in that way. So I think just learning about our roots and learning about even pre-slavery, just learning about Africa and finding that pride would be very important.
Yeah, I feel like Africa is interesting because Africa does not necessarily need the help of the West. And there is foreign aid that goes into Africa and that gets into geopolitics, but that aid is always attached with clauses and terms and conditions. And when you look at Africa with the ascension of education, universal basic healthcare, and these things advancing, Africa as a continent has the youngest demographic in the world. China, baby boomer, aging out, dying. Same thing with Europe, same thing with North America. So the brains, the energy, the natural resources will come from Africa. The 22nd century, I'll say, is Africa. 21st, I'll say, is China. America's on the way down, but no jokes there. I think it's actually true. If we can arrive at connecting back with Africa, and I think that could start by some of the repatriation and restitution of the loot and the colonial imprint on Africa. I think we can start remedy some of those things. The Black community, we all kind of want damage compensation for slavery that happened. Maybe that can come from support from the African nations, support from the Caribbean, forming more coalitions, and finding a way to contest colonialism and imperialism that's happening today. I don't think we tap into Africa enough, but we should view Africa as a friend and an ally. And I want to say this, is that most Africans do not experience racism and the N-word the same way North Americans do. Friends that come from Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and they come here and they're like, what? This is what happens? Because in Nigeria, you're viewed as equal. So my friends who are from Congo do not understand racism the same way that we do. So while we want to connect back with Africa, that continental divide has created like this rift that I don't think is just because we're African descendants and they're from Africa doesn't automatically mean that there is a connection. We have to go make those connections. For example, raise your hand if you've ever been to sub-Saharan Africa. So we have two, right? I've never been. I was in Egypt, so I was right over Sudan, but most people don't have strong connection with Africa, so maybe reconnecting, but we might get there and we're foreigners.
Wait, I went to Kenya.
Oh, you went to Kenya?
I went to Kenya.
And how was that?
Well,
yeah, let's ask you a question. How was Kenya?
So I went to Kenya, but it's listen, I went on a safari. So I thought you guys were gonna laugh. So I went there on a safari and it was luxurious. So it wasn't, I didn't get to really go into the Nairobi or into the town. It was a luxurious vacation. But I was traveling with my parents who were white. And so a lot of people came up to us. We did have one day where we went and met people, the Maasai, and we were offered blood. And that was a way of them welcoming us into their home. And out of all the places, it was the Maasai who completely accepted my sister and I with our white parents. They didn't have a problem with that. But in the city, it was something else. Questions. But yeah, and so I recently did a DNA test because I wanted to know about myself. You know, I know that I'm Haitian, and you know, but what does that really mean? And I wanted to know where I'm from, and so I found out je suis Sénégalaise.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I'm also a quarter Irish. So go figure. Something happened in there, and I don't know. Well, it was 80%. Senegalese, I was gonna say 75% Senegalese. So we're from West Africa, and so when I found that out, I was like, I always knew it. I knew I was from West Africa. It was just important for me to do that. And so, you know, you're talking about our relationship with Africa. I think I still have a long ways to go. I'm still learning, and that's just the beginning for me. And I have to ask one of you guys. You guys can answer it. Why don't we here in Canada call ourselves African Canadian? Why do we say we're Jamaican, we're Bayesian, we're that? And
I have to say, in Eastern Canada, we do.
You do?
Yeah,
You say
absolutely.
African Canadian?
Yeah, 100%. That's how I identify. That's how my family identifies.
I've never said I'm African Canadian.
That's why I found it was really different when I moved here. And like I said, everybody was always sort of like, what are you?
Identifying themselves specifically. I'm Bayesian, I'm Jamaican, I'm Trinidad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I get asked a lot of questions, but that didn't really happen growing up on the East Coast, and everybody was like very clear about like being African Canadian for sure.
African Canadian, African American?
To me, the term is interchangeable. I've referred to myself as African Canadian, but I always identified stronger with Caribbean or West Indian roots because both my parents are from Trinidad.
Okay.
But I have no problem identifying as African.
So the U.S., they had a melting pot that everyone was American. Trudeau, his father, passed this Multicultural Act. So to have your own identity and connect it back to your origins is part of Canadian policy and the way that we view ourselves. In the US, you're American. And so there's erasure. Also, there's erasure because you came on a slave ship. And there were significantly more amounts of descendants of slaves in the US than there is in Canada. I think Canada at the highest time had something like 4,000 or something. In the US, you're talking millions.
Right.
So most people who've come to Canada are immigrants and voluntary immigrants. My father was a voluntary immigrant here. Involuntary immigrants, meaning slaves in the US, you don't even know where you're from. You have
So
to
you're
go to-
African
Yeah.
African American. Very interesting. Okay, closing words, guys. We're gonna close this up. I'm gonna start with you, Nikki. Okay. Just a few words. What this meant to you tonight, how you feeling, how you feel about being a Black woman representing in the media.
I was really excited, also nervous to come here and speak tonight. I'm really proud to be up here with all three of you, however, and I'm really excited to continue to educate myself. Like you said, you still feel like you need to educate yourself. I'm really excited to do that and to continue to find my power and see how I can speak out more, absolutely, and continue to learn from all of you guys.
So thank you very much for having me. It's been wonderful. I say closing word is that we are beginning to take back our dignity, our humanity, and racism will be overcome because we are on the right side of history. It's a matter of taking care of our home, our communities, and everything gonna be all right.
That's right. Oh, Mary.
I guess I'll end with, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, and thank you for doing an amazing job of hosting. And I guess I would just say, as cheesy as it is, knowledge is power. I would just educate young Black people in particular to seek knowledge and seek mentors.
Yeah, and I just have to add to it, being a Black face in the media, I have to say how exciting it is to have women of my color. When I say my color, dark skin, because I'm dark skin for the white people who don't understand that. This is light skin and this is dark skin. And so when you have Black females specifically who come up to you and they're like, thank you for being the face of power for me, it means a lot. And especially coming from a family where everybody's white, it means a lot for me to be here, and I appreciate it. I have a lot to learn about my roots, about what it means to be a Black woman, but I am here and I'm happy, let me tell you. So once again, thank you guys so much for taking time out to be here with us this evening. Overture with the Arts AAA Conference. Thank you so much, guys.